Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, and thank you for joining us. Today we are presenting EMU scheduling and a version 5.0 update. This will be presented by Hayden Foltine and Michael Gliana. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToMeeting control panel. I will raise them for discussion at the end of the presentation. Please also put yourself on mute. Now, without further ado, we'd like to turn the time over to Hayden Foltine.
Thank you, Kerry. Appreciate that. And hello and welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those who have chosen to spend some time with us today to talk about our latest developments in the EMU platform. We have a mixture of people from around the world that our customers that have been using EMU for a while, and therefore this is a good update and refresher for them to be able to consider what they might do in terms of an upgrade process in accepting the new capability of EMU 5.0, which came to market December 31st, 2017. So we're sort of a month out with the EMU platform now in version 5.0. But equally, we've got a whole lot of guys who are joining that have not yet experienced EMU in any detail whatsoever. And so today, we not only wanted this conversation for the next half an hour or so to be about introducing the brand new functionality of EMU 5.0, but also take the opportunity to have a bit of a recap on the things that EMU can do for you and your BroadWorks environments, and not only for you, but many other different stakeholders in your environment, those being the people that are responsible in product management, those that are responsible in engineering of a BroadWorks platform, those involved in the operations and upkeep of a BroadWorks platform, but even those that are involved in the front of house customer care aspects of the services that you bring to market in terms of the BroadWorks Cloud Unified Communications Platform. So what I'd like to do is to spend a couple of minutes before I hand over to Michael Gliana to give us an update on the brand new capabilities in 5.0, to take us back to the core functionality of EMU, and then get everyone up to speed with that first for the next couple of minutes, and then divert our attention to those new functions that have been released in 5.0. So for those that are new to the platform, this particular slide here is probably the best way to articulate all the various capabilities that are now available to those people that own and operate a BroadWorks platform. These are functions that, for all intents and purposes, have not been able to be performed in the past without EMU. But EMU as a platform now has the opportunity to interact with the data, with the subscriber configurations, and the system configuration on our BroadWorks platform to a degree and a level of depth that has never been able to be achieved before. That means that we're able to now create some user experiences, some capabilities that are brand new to service providers in managing what is a very complicated, very large and diverse set of subscriber data configurations across the network. And so what I'd like to introduce is those top 5 features that we expose within the user interface for people who are sitting behind the EMU portal to be able to interact with on a day-by-day basis. But also please remember that these functions that we're showing you here are also available as APIs that other systems can capitalize on to extract or to interact with the BroadWorks data in your network. And so we will talk a little bit about some of the enhancements that Michael's team's put together around some of those API developments a little bit later as well. So firstly, just to recap, EMU as a platform stands for Extraction, Manipulation and Update. And it's an acronym that means a lot to us, and it means a lot to those that are able to extract literally anything from a BroadWorks platform, to be able to manipulate that information in a human readable form, and then to update that information back onto the network to be able to perform changes, to be able to manipulate the way in which subscribers are configured at any particular level in the network itself, and do that en masse. And when we mean en masse, we have the opportunity to change one setting for thousands of users, or we can change many settings for a single user. And we do that using the audit functions to extract literally everything about a user or a PBX of a particular customer or the entire network as a whole, and then be able to then update that information and push that modified information back. We can use the ability to audit to then also compare what we've once audited as a snapshot with what is on the network in real time right now. So the ability for a front of house team to be able to take last night's audit of a customer configuration and cross-check that with the current configuration on the network to see the differences. And those differences will probably lead to why the customer's ringing in and asking for some support. And the compare function is that function that allows support teams to very quickly zero in on the issues that may be impacting a customer's service. EMU has the opportunity to orchestrate and create customer PBX configurations on the BroadWorks platform through simple spreadsheet template input mechanisms. A provisioning team is able to describe a customer and all the users and all their configuration in a very simple templated form and give that to EMU to then orchestrate on the network to create all the services and create all the devices and create a default configuration. And so the EMU is also being used by a number of people as a provisioning platform as well. Probably the most sophisticated capability within the platform is its ability to perform migrations. And what we mean by migrations is the movement of customer and customer data around the network, between BroadWorks platforms, between BroadWorks versions of platforms, between different enterprises, and to be able to move groups of users en masse in totality between different parts of the BroadWorks environment. Maybe it's the concept of a group being moved from one enterprise to another enterprise. Think of government departments who constantly change and those users move virtually from one PBX to another PBX. Well, there are no tools to be able to do that in a very effective, simple, and highly accurate way. And EMU represents for the first time our ability to do those sorts of things. Also of a keen interest to a lot of our customers is the ability to do backup and recovery. Believe it or not, there is actually no way to uniquely back up a customer group in the BroadWorks platform unless you back up the entire BroadWorks database as a whole. And so that causes significant problems in terms of the restoration process because many other customers are impacted when a platform database is restored just because of one particular customer's issues. And so now we have a unique capability to be able to back up just that customer configuration information, able to compress it, encrypt it, and store it away as a time-stamped backup of that particular customer's PBX configuration in its totality. So in the event that there is a problem with that, then there's the ability to restore that. And so these are just some of the functions that work either in isolation and or coupled together to allow a person or a team inside a service provider to better manage and effectively manage what is a very complicated data structure, what is a very complicated and large, diverse customer configuration, but now using a very, very simple portal to be able to interact with that. So with that, Michael, I might just ask you to move on to the next slide and introduce some of the three key functions of EMU 5.0. And I'm just going to introduce them quickly and then hand over to Michael to actually give us a real live demonstration of these functions. EMU 5.0 represents a brand new capability to schedule all of those functions that I just described to you a few minutes ago. The ability to audit a customer environment, but do it based on now a schedule. So think of EMU now supporting across all of those functions, a very powerful scheduling engine to perform that function, but while you're not there. A very powerful thing for the preparations for and then the implementation of changes to the network that may be happening in change windows when those people responsible are actually not working at that time. So very, very powerful engine, which we'll show you today. There is a brand new architecture inside EMU that allows EMU to maximize the potential of the BroadWorks API called OCIP. And that particular protocol, OCIP, is the one that we use to interact with BroadWorks at all levels. And to maximize its performance, is one that we need to be able to perform very, very large scale activities and to do that in a timely manner. And we'll talk about that in just a little while. But fundamentally, EMU is now architected to be able to perform parallel execution processing into the BroadWorks platform so that we can accelerate the time by which we perform audits, or the time by which we perform backups, for example. It allows us to use EMU in environments where there literally are millions of subscribers on the platform, and we're able to interact with those environments in a very time-efficient way. And as we talked about at the start of the call, EMU is not just a portal, it's also a platform by which other systems can interact in a very simple, published, RESTful API environment, and have other systems benefit from the things that EMU can extract, gather, and perform on behalf of those systems. Think of other billing systems, think of OSS systems, and other platforms within the service provider's environment. Michael's just going to spend a few minutes towards the end of the session today just describing some of those enhancements that have again increased the flexibility for developers and for other systems to interact with the EMU platform as well. So moving on, what I'd like to do is to quickly describe some of the key use cases, some of the reasons why auditing is such an important thing, and then why now scheduling as now time-based addition to an audit is such an important dynamic in the platform now in version 5.0. Think of the opportunity now for many different people inside the service provider to be able to run audits on the network for various different types of information, but do it either on an ad hoc basis, maybe to run the schedule sometime in the future, but just run it once, in preparation for something that's coming up, for instance, or to perform audits on the network on a repetitive, regular basis. And it might be for a product manager to be able to start to understand how the features that they've now just deployed are being consumed by their customers. And so now we have an opportunity to timestamp and track and trend the way in which features are being consumed across the network by looking at that consumption over time. And auditing of the network using a schedule is the way in which we can now achieve that. And we can do things on a daily basis, we can do things on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis, depending on who are the people that need the data and when do they need it by. And Michael will take us through that in just a minute to show us how we very easily can set up those audits and do that from a scheduling perspective. One of the key things that our customers asked for some time back was the ability to perform unique backups and then do that on a regular basis, again, creating the concept of a time machine. And now what we have the opportunity to do is to work with our customers to offer backup as a premium service with a certain frequency, all the way down to maybe a free service now, where that particular customer and their PBX is known to be now uniquely backed up, maybe on a monthly basis, maybe on a daily basis or a weekly basis. There's opportunities for service providers to maybe even monetize that opportunity to supply premium services like a backup service. And then we've added scheduling to the customer migration capability. Often the situation is that a provisioning team receives a request from a customer to make a change, maybe to migrate some customers, maybe to split a group or to merge some groups together within the BroadWorks platform, and that might have to happen in a change window. Well, now we have the opportunity to schedule that particular change, that particular migration activity, without the need for any complex BroadWorks engineers to be on call and available. Simply as a provisioning person in a provisioning team, you can schedule that particular migration to happen in the designated migration window, maybe that coming particular weekend. And so with that, what I might do is just hand over to Michael to say hello and to take us through some of these particular real life scenarios as to why scheduling has now become an intrinsic part across the entire EMU framework. For all these functions that you can now on your screen. So over to you, Michael, to take us through the live demo.
Thanks, Hayden. Hello and good day to everyone. My name is Michael Gliana. I'm the CTO of BroadSource and the lead for product and development. And today I'm going to give you a quick demo on the scheduling capability of EMU. For those of you who are familiar with EMU, you're looking at the web interface of it and all the legacy functionality that we had in pre-version 5. For those of you who are not very familiar with EMU, I would invite you to have a look at our YouTube channel and look at the previous webinars about the functions that we had pre-version 5. Today's demo focus will be on the scheduling capability of those functions. So let me give you a quick demo of the audit functions, and let's pretend that the timing feature wasn't there, and we go back to the pre-version 5 auditing capability. So let's do a system-wide audit of every group on the system and pick a certain group feature like profile call processing policies. So let's assume that the system administrator or the product manager wants to look at all the call processing policies for every group on the system to find out how many concurrent calls they allow. Maybe there was a fraud and there was people utilizing a number of concurrent calls, and there is an analysis that need to be done to look at that across the system. And this can easily be done with the audit feature. And we can, and we did it for 17 users, and I can download that file and open it up, and the information is going to be presented nicely in Excel format for every group in the system, and they are all call processing policies one by one in terms of the number of concurrent groups, whether they allow CLID, things like that. So this is the feature that we had pre-version 5. And was very powerful and can extract any information out of the system at any level, like Hayden said. But now what we've added in version 5 is ability to do exactly the same thing. Example, like before, profile call processing policies. But say I want to do that every day, or I want to do it after hours because I'm doing it for 50,000 groups and it could take some time, and I don't want to put additional load on the system. With the scheduling, now we can schedule this to happen later. So I can say now like before, or I can say later. And when I say later, I get presented with the frequency. I can run it as an ad hoc once-off task, or I can run it as a recurring task. So if I run it as a once-off, I can choose the date and the time I want to run this at, and I get presented with a nice widget to do that. So I can select my day, and I can select my time to be, say, 10, 20. Let's schedule it to happen in 4 minutes. So 10:25 and 25 p.m. And now instead of running it now, I've scheduled the task to run in the next 3 minutes, or I can schedule it to run in the next hour, or during maintenance window, or on a weekend. Let's do another scheduling. Let's go to something that people normally run on regular basis, like a backup, and go and back up a group. Let's back up the Brisbane group. And everything in it, all the group level data, virtual users within the group. So I'll select all, and later. And instead of running it once, I want to run that regularly. And I can decide on the frequency. So it could be like every minute or every hour, and then decide how many minutes past the hour, or every day, and then decide when, or every week. And I decide on the day and the time of the week that I need this to run, or every month, and I decide on the date of the month and the time, or every year. So, and again, or if I want to run it at once, I say once. So let's schedule something recurring that happens every hour. And say 30 minutes past the hour, and I've scheduled the backup, and then I go to migration, and let's say that I wanted to migrate a group, and what and let's migrate the same group that we backed up. So I can automatically back up a group and then migrate it without me being there. And that gives me the confidence if anything happens during migration, though the migration through EMU has full rollback capability and it's very risk-free, but the scheduling gives me also the extra confidence that I can do a full backup of that group unattended before I attempt to migrate it. So let's go and schedule a migration. So I'll choose the scope to be migrating a group, and I'll do the same group, Brisbane, and I'll migrate it to, say, to a service provider. So not just I'm migrating a whole group, which until now wasn't even feasible to do it in any automatic way. Now I'm migrating the group from a service provider construct to entirely new construct, which is under the enterprise construct, and doing that unattended. And let's call it Brisbane new. And let's do it later once, and let's do it today. And let's choose the time to be 10:35 after the backup PM. So I've now scheduled 3 different tasks to happen later, and now I can go and look at my task under the schedule tab. So, and I can filter, I can either choose the run once tab, and then I only get presented with the ones that run once off, or recurring task, and I get presented with the recurring task, or I can choose everything if I don't have too many, and that will show me everything that I've scheduled. And you notice that, you know, we are one schedule less than, we schedule 3 and we see 2, because we see the ones that they're still active, and the ones that already done, they will go to my task history. So if I come here and I'll see the audit that's already run, then I can view all the tasks that we've already scheduled and they ran. And then I can select the task that I would like more information about, and then go to the task results. And that will show me all the logs, all the stats for that task as if it happened right now. And then I can go and download the output file for that task as well. So it's very similar experience to running it now. You get the exact same experience, but it happens later, and still give you the full capability of, you know, drilling down through the logs and looking at all the logs, all the errors, all the stats for that task, and ability to retrieve all the outputs. And then we can look at the audit exactly like before. So the scheduling is really powerful. It means that you can schedule things to happen later or to happen regularly. It depends on the requirements. You can do things that schedule backups at different intervals based on SLA requirements. So some customers, you'll back up their data, you know, on daily basis. Some other customers with, you know, less level of SLA commitments, you'll back up their data every week, and so, but also gives you the ability to do migrations as well and attend it. So that concludes my demo about scheduling, Hayden, and back to you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. So clearly, we've just increased the possibilities manyfold for people and the way in which they can now interact with the EMU platform as it interacts with their BroadWorks environment. So all of a sudden now we've got the opportunity to cascade or concatenate different EMU functions that can be tied together as a part of maybe an upcoming change window. So what I found very compelling about that is that a person who's responsible for a change can do things like the preparationary steps, the steps needed to make sure the change is going to happen properly, and do that prior, like for instance take a backup of the customer before we make any changes, and then make those changes and maybe even then maybe compare using the EMU compare function what happened ultimately in the end. So the ability for us to make these things happen from a scheduled perspective as opposed to having been attended and having to do it sitting behind the EMU platform itself. And so we've got now many new scenarios that we'd encourage you to think about how they become valuable, not just for if you're an engineering person who's responsible for building and maintaining a BroadWorks platform, but also those that are in the rest of the business that can benefit from the analytics and the data that can be extracted now and can be done on a repetitive basis. So now all of a sudden we have another dimension to the information that can be extracted from a platform which is time-based, and how time and things can change over time. And that's very, very powerful information in the hands of a product manager or a team responsible for understanding what is changing on their network and how they need to make better decisions around either the way the product is positioned, the way it's being promoted, or the way in which it's being managed in terms of the resources that are on the platform. So this is, for us, the start of, in effect, the analytics journey on a BroadWorks platform, and EMU is the conduit to be able to do that. And so in summary then, we've got a scheduling capability that spans all of the functions now. One of the key things that was a part of EMU 5.0 was to make sure that we could improve the way in which we interacted with larger and larger and larger environments. And Mike, did you want me to now progress towards the parallel execution, or did you want to go back and have a look at how we're tracking?
I just want to go back and show the result of the backup task that we've scheduled to happen at 10:30. And as we see here, that it has already run, and now it's in our task history. So we set it up as a regular recurring job to happen 30 minutes every hour, 30 minutes past the hour, and now we just passed the 30 minutes mark, and then we'll see that task has run, and we have an entry for it in the task history, and says it was back up and was run at 10:30 and took 7 seconds to finish. So we can now go and look at the results of that, and it tell us about that it backed up the group called Acme Brisbane and give us all the logs for that and all the stats, and then I can go and download the file. And as you can see here, it's a binary file encrypted, and it's stored on the system, and I'll be able to retrieve it anytime I like, in case I will need the to restore from that backup. I just wanted to show that, and we have another task that we also scheduled to happen at 10:35. And once we get to that stage, I would like to take you back to EMU and show you how the migration task happened and attended as well. So back to you, Hayden.
That's a good point. I think there's new types of scenarios that are emerging every day about how things like the backup file can be used. And we're even getting very simple requests for EMU to be installed to help the service provider even back up their own lab environments, or maybe back up their sales demo environments, so that we know that typically those are the least well-maintained environments within a BroadWorks environment, and the opportunity maybe to use EMU to re-baseline those environments prior to either a demonstration, a sales presentation, or the start of a project. And we know that labs are usually left in a pretty sorry state at the end of a particular project that might run for 2 or 3 weeks. But using EMU backup, we're able to back up the lab in a known state before the project starts, and simply when the team's finished, we can just restore the lab. And so all of a sudden that is saving hours and hours and hours and hours of time for teams in the preparation of and the execution of these sorts of activities. And so we think that the scheduling of this is a very important dynamic, because all of a sudden EMU is away doing many functions across a day, across a week, across a month, that can be now unattended. And all that has to happen is that you return to EMU to retrieve the information on an as-needs basis, as opposed to needing to sit behind it and instigate the extraction of that information. Now, Mike, I noticed it's now gone 35 minutes past the hour, and we're probably in the middle of a migration, I suspect, which may not be finished, depending on how large the group is. But to back to you and to see if that migration is now in the task history.
Thank you, Hayden. Yes, so we'll probably take a minute or two for us to get the result of the migration, but it should already be in our task history now. If we go to schedule, and it should have kicked off. So if we go to the task history, and here it is, it says a migrate that was kicked off at 35 minutes past 10. And then if we select that and go to task results, and output of the migration gives it the information. And now if we go to look at the group, now we'll see the group has actually migrated from ACME to ACME International, and from an enterprise that's called ACME to a service provider that's called ACME International. So let me just show you that on the lab.
So this is the proof in the pudding that we've literally moved the group and all of the aspects of that group, including all the users, the virtual users, all of the settings for each of those users, and even all the passwords for each of the people, has moved that from one place to another in totality, to the point at which I believe and understand that the phones don't even actually need to be rebooted. So there's actually no impact to the service. What you might expect, though, that if we can even move people from different BroadWorks platforms, which in fact then would probably need a telephone reboot, but that's not the case in this instance.
And you can see here, we did misspell Brisbane here, so it didn't come up in the search, but so it's Brisbane New, and then it was migrated to ACME International, and all the users within it were migrated, including their phone numbers. This was almost impossible to do before automatically, and the only way to migrate was to reconstruct the data. That was one problem, and the problem was a lot more difficult when you were migrating from an enterprise, which the ACME enterprise is. So it's an enterprise construct, to a service provider construct, which is the ACME International. And we just demoed that. We did that very easily. Took us only a minute, and even we didn't have to be there and attend it.
Thanks, Mike. So, guys, we're just summarizing and closing off the brand new function inside EMU 5.0, which is the scheduling capability. There've been other investments and a lot of hard effort and energy from the team over the last number of months to get us to EMU 5.0 as well, and they relate to other functions that we've now implemented in the platform itself. And I was going to get Mike to reflect on some of the ways in which we've improved the way in which EMU interacts with the BroadWorks platform via the published and open protocol called OCIP. As we often get questions about the fact that we use EMU in a very standards-based way using those protocols that are published by BroadSoft, how does EMU perform, and how does EMU interact with the BroadWorks platform when the data volumes can be just so large? And that's the topic for what we've also invested a lot of time and effort and energy into in terms of the micro services capability within EMU that's been delivered in 5.0. So, Mike, was there anything else that we wanted to reflect on that fact, or?
I just wanted to elaborate a little bit about the reason for that. So OCIP is the standard protocol that BroadWorks provides, and it's been there for a long time. It's a very capable and stable protocol. Yet it's not one of the quickest protocols that you come across, mainly when you retrieve a large amount of data. And being a legacy protocol means it doesn't follow the standard ways of parallel processing and asynchronous programming and things that we see today in that allows you to do mass scale deployment and mass scale processing of data. So what we did with EMU, we tried to overcome that problem by making EMU utilizes the full bandwidth of the OCIP and the provisioning server by parallel processing the request within EMU itself, and then EMU take care of gathering all the segments, if you like, and creating the response back to the user. This allows, it shortens the round trip delay, which is the time that was usually consuming most of the wait for the OCI to reply, but also means that we can scale now OCI to the limits by having more and more threads going at the same time, and then EMU takes after all the coordination. Yet we've done it in a way where we don't impact the call processing of the server, because we go to a provisioning server that has lower priority than the execution server. So call processing always takes precedence over whatever we're doing here on the provisioning server. But what we do is we utilize the full bandwidth of the provisioning server when the execution server, which runs the call processing policy, is not busy running calls. So the best of both worlds. We're not impacting the system, but we're also utilizing the full bandwidth, and we are overcoming the problem of having to wait for the messages to go to the server and come back and waste time there. And that's what the microservices architecture is going to give us, and also is going to enhance the response time that we get from a BroadWorks system, and which is great not just for EMU, but also for when EMU becomes the platform for serving API, which is our next topic that we're going to talk about and demo to you today. So
yeah, thanks, Mike. I think it'd be fair to say that you saw some of those spreadsheets earlier that Michael was showing you, which were the results of what in effect were thousands and thousands of API requests on a BroadWorks platform. Just as an example, to be able to retrieve all the configuration information about a customer group is something like over 3,000 attributes, which probably equals something like, I don't know, thousands of API calls onto the BroadWorks platform. And the way in which EMU 5.0 faces off against the BroadWorks platform is, in our world, probably the most efficient and highly efficient way, with the parallel task execution capabilities now into that OCI environment and into BroadWorks. So we're kind of running it as best as BroadWorks will allow us to run it architecturally, in terms of being able to extract as much information and or interact with BroadWorks in the quickest possible time frame. And so some of the stats that are coming back around the performance in large scale environments are just staggering in terms of the shortened time frames in being able to achieve the same result, but in a lot faster time frame. Okay. Mike, did you want to flick on a couple of slides to get us to the point where we talk about the API enhancements that are now part of 5.0 as well?
Sure.
Okay. One thing we talked about earlier and what Michael's been demonstrating is EMU, the portal. And one of the things that often is a part of a deployment for EMU is that it is being used as a portal, but equally other systems can now also get access to EMU via RESTful APIs and interact with EMU to do exactly the same functions that you could do via the portal, but now do it from a programmatic and a systems perspective. So what I might quickly do is hand over to Michael to describe the new way in which we're offering that access and the formats in which we can now deliver information back to those that ask for it.
Thanks, Hayden. So we've demoed the web interface, and that's what most customers deal with normally, but that's only one interface into EMU. EMU is more than just a portal, so it is actually a platform, and it has a number of interfaces, including the web interface. There is also a command line interface, and there are the EMU extensions. We call them Kiwis, which add additional logic and capability to the standard EMU functions. And there are the EMU APIs. And the EMU APIs, they very powerful APIs. And they run at different levels. So we have a complete 100% OCI mapping, and we call them the EMU primitive APIs. And what they do is that they convert OCI to from a TCP protocol using XML to a RESTful API protocol using JSON or XML or HTML, and the choice is yours. So it makes it really, really easy to interact with the BroadWorks API. You don't have to establish sessions and do XML parsing and the rest of it. Every API call, it's especially the GET ones, are literally just a URL that you type into your browser or your REST API client, and then you get the response. And let me give you a demo of that. So let's do the call processing policies that we did before. Let's do that via an API. And all I need to do, it's a little bit small, the URL, is to specify the API and the group, which is Acme Melbourne, and then the name of the API, which is policy version 17, and then what format I want that in, and I'm choosing JSON format, and that's it. So I just typed in one URL and pressed enter, and then I executed an API on the BroadWorks system, and I got the data back nicely formatted as JSON data. These are the primitive APIs, and we do support all the APIs that you see in the OCI schema. So let's do another API. Again, it's just another URL into that group Acme Melbourne, and I'm getting the service authorization list. A lot bigger API, and you can see the data nicely structured, and I can retrieve the data, and also even chart the data if I want to. And the other nice things about EMU APIs is that I can choose my format. So if I want to do XML, I say I want that in XML, and it gets printed out in XML. And if I want that to be displayed as a flat structure, so to know the content of the data, then I don't specify the format, and I get a nice HTML page with the output of the API flattened to a flat structure. So really powerful to get familiar with the APIs, understand the APIs, and use the APIs in a standard format like a web JSON format, or even XML format, or HTML. And this is just one level of the EMU APIs, which is the primitives. Now EMU builds on it itself uses the primitive APIs to build on, and then it creates what we call functional APIs, which abstract the complexity of the OCIP APIs and combine a number of APIs to create what we call them items and menus. So an item would be a logical grouping of data, and a menu would be a logical grouping of item. If you're familiar with CommPilot, you can think of the menus on CommPilot and the menu item. For example, a call forwarding always would be an item, and outgoing calls or incoming calls would be a menu. And EMU supports that fully, so every menu and menu item is represented nicely and simply through a URL. So if I want to retrieve all the addresses of every profile on the system, I can do that, or for just a single user, like here for Hayden, I can do that with a simple URL like this. And now this doesn't match to a number of OCIP APIs and combines all those in a nicely structured format to give profile information about the user. That's the second level of the EMU APIs. It's a higher level, and we call them the EMU function. And any other functions that you see that is presented on the web, there's also an equivalent API for that. So all the audit capabilities here, and every scope has an equivalent API. Same thing for all the other functions like the compare, the update, and the provision. And these are even the higher level API that you can get, which is the equivalent to running the web interface. So and let me show you an example of that. So if I want to extract all the information for every user in a group, all I need is just, again, another nicely formatted URL. I say audit all users in group, and my group is Acme Melbourne, and I need the data in JSON format. And of course, that will take a minute or two because I'm exporting the whole group in this case. Back to you, Hayden. I'll show you the results when we get it back.
When I see the screen change, I'll give it back to you. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So I guess what we're trying to do here is to bring lots of different ways in which service providers can get access to the capability of EMU, not just as something that you need to sit down behind as a portal. It may be now something that you can schedule and let EMU go away for the next day, for the next week, for the next month, or even the next year to run the list of tasks that you need it to do to extract the information or do the things you need it to do on your network on an ongoing basis. And then equally, you can do the same, but not as a portal, but from another system perspective. It looks like it's back. Is that right?
Yes, that it's back, and we have the output for 3 users, and we see for the first user that we had 140 items exported, for the second user 49, and for the third user 54, and that's based on how many services and settings each user had in that group. And then we can expand that to get all the access devices and addresses and all the other structures within a user. Very nicely formatted. And if you have some of the extension, you can easily map that to graphs and see the data within each level. So it's very easy to deal with, very easy to understand. You can pass it to other systems to create an end-to-end provisioning interface to do things automatically on BroadWorks. And I would like also to make a note about the capability of EMU APIs when you compare them to XSI, for example. XSI is also a RESTful protocol, but also it's very limited to the user level, while the EMU functional APIs, they go and support every level on the system. That's the user, the virtual user, the group, the enterprise, and the system level. Another notable differences between the two is that the JSON format in EMU, it follows the standard JSON format, while the XSI, it's an XML converted to JSON, and you have extra $sign that you need to parse and deal with, which breaks many of the off-the-shelf component that deals with JSON. For example, here I could easily have a CommPilot plugin to map the data and graph it, and you can't do that with the output of XSI because it doesn't follow like the simple standard web format.
Fantastic. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. So that kind of takes us to the end of the material we wanted to present. And just to recap then, EMU 5.0 represented our major release for 2017 and sets us up for 2018 in terms of now what will be some minor releases coming every 3 months through the year. and the guys are putting the finishing touches on EMU 5.1, which is just a minor release that'll be launched in the March timeframe. So encourage you to reach out to the team at BroadSource and talk to them about a potential upgrade opportunity to this particular functionality from the platform that you're on already today, and also to talk to your teams about how you can capitalize on some of the capability that's now available in the EMU platform. So with that, thank you, Michael. Really appreciate you taking us through what in effect is pretty compelling and powerful logic that now runs inside the EMU platform to manage even more environments for customers around the world. So thank you, I appreciate that, and thanks to the team. So with that, we're finished with our content. There are a few minutes left, and I wanted to just refer back to Kerry and ask, while Michael and I have been talking, whether anyone has had the opportunity to ask any questions that we can help them out with, if that's okay.
Thank you, Hayden, and thank you, Michael, for that insightful demo. We have received a few questions, so I'll go ahead and read them out. Michael, these ones are related to scheduling. We just wanted confirmation that we can schedule multiple updates, etc., at the one time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can schedule as many tasks as you like to happen exactly at the same time, and you have multiple processes that run the schedules, and depends on the number of schedules that you've that the user scheduled. So no problem to schedule multiple tasks to run at the same time.
Thank you, Michael. The next question is in regards to the REST APIs. How do they compare to XSI?
Yeah, so one main difference is the level. While EMU APIs, they support all the different levels of the BroadWorks hierarchy and data modeling. XSI, it's by design limited to user level feature settings. It doesn't allow you any administration level tasks, even at the user level, and doesn't allow any functionality at any of the higher levels than the user, like virtual user, or the group, or the customer, or the enterprise, or even the system. And that was by design. And the other main difference in my view is that XSI, it's an automatic conversion of XML to JSON, while EMU supports pure JSON format. And like I said in the demo, that sometimes when you try to deal with the output of the XSI, you have to cater for that additional $sign that you have in every field, which breaks many of the shelf component that deals with JSON to map it, or to map it to widgets, or map it to charts and other APIs and things like that. It makes it very problematic to deal with it with the off-the-shelf components. While with the EMU APIs, they nicely play with many of the off-the-shelf components, and I've demoed that with the JSON plugin that I put in Chrome, and how nicely you could take the EMU output and format it, and even create a chart out of it.
Thanks, Michael. The last question, you spoke about OCIP before. So using that, how long does it take to do migrations?
So it largely depends on the size of what you're migrating, and EMU can migrate a single user, a whole group, a whole enterprise, or if you like, the whole system. And so, and really depends on how many. If we're migrating a group, for example, it depends on how many users we have in that group, and how many features and virtual users we have in that group. So really, the answer, it depends. But what we do with our migration is that two things that are different to the standard way of migrating users. Firstly, our migration is not service impacting, and it's built from 10 steps. Only one step is service impacting, and it's the quickest step, because we don't extract data, remove it, and then create it. What we do is we create a replica of the data, and when the time is ready for migration, then we only switch IDs. So the service impacting step is very, very short and very, very quick. And the rest now with the addition of scheduling, that can happen anytime, and the rest of the steps can be scheduled to happen anytime, and they're all non-service impacting. So I think the way that we went about migration plus scheduling make it irrelevant for it, how long does it take, but it really depends on the size of the group. And we can go from anything from a few seconds to sometimes it's a very large group, could take an hour or two for thousands of users to be migrated.
Great. Michael, Hayden, was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap up this webinar?
No, thank you. That's all the questions? That's all good?
Yes, that's everything.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
back to you, Kerry.
Thanks. We appreciate you being here. If you do have any further questions regarding today's webinar, please contact us via our website. We'd be more than happy to set up a time to go through it with you one-on-one. As Michael mentioned earlier, we do have previous webinars on our YouTube channel, so you're welcome to view those at your leisure. They include an EMU overview, and we do some drill downs into EMU migration and EMU compare. So once again, thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to having you on the next call. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.